Welcome to Illini Sports Night. I'm Josh Peach,
I'm Joseph Fox.
and this is Making a Point. Tonight, we will be discussing whether or not the MLB should continue to use umpires to call balls and strikes in the game. Joe, what do you think about this issue?
Well, when you bring up umpiring, you bring up tradition. And baseball, of course, America's pastime, has been around since 1839, since the days of Abner Doubleday. And in baseball, it's still prominent today, almost 200 years later in America's culture. But when you bring up the idea of automated strike zones, and it really makes you question the legacy of the game. Players have to change the way they play the game. I really believe that that could develop a lot of issues within the game that aren't here currently. So, for example, with the players and changing how they play the game, size and stance is what determines the strike zone of a player. It's not to the preference of a strike zone. It's not to the preference of the umpires. It's the size and the stance, and if you have an automated strike zone, you would have to adjust that for every single player. In addition, there's also, in the last 3 years, in the playoffs, they've been using and testing out this technology, and they have the tendency to call strikes lower and also call less higher. So there are issues with the automated strike zone, and there's a lot of unknown with this new technology.
So I think that umpires, we've seen them since the game has started. They're fun to watch, but it's time for them to go. The MLB and other private organizations started tracking whether calling a ball or strike was good back in 2008. Originally, the percentile of bad calls was at 17. It has gone down a little bit. Up to 2018, it was just above 10%. To put that into perspective, in 2018, 34,294 bad strike or ball calls were called throughout the season. That's about 15 per game, or 1.5 to 2 per inning. It doesn't sound that bad, but when you go up to 2 strikes on a hitter, the bad call ratio goes up to 29%. This is just straight up unfair. Players like Chris Bryant have explicitly said that players learn their strike zone, and if you have an umpire that's consistently calling bad calls, you can't succeed. And now, what happens when a player disagrees with an umpire? It goes to arguing, which leads to ejections. In 2019, 217 players were ejected from games, and almost all of those stem from balls and strike calls. The MLB is having time issues with games. They've always been trying to speed up the game, but ejections definitely slow this down. Now, something else that would benefit from removing umpires would be money. The rookie umpires make about $150,000 a year, with the senior ones make about $450,000. There are 89 umpires, so the MLB would save about $27 million by removing umpires.
Well, you do make quite a few good points, but I'm going to have to disagree with you with regards to making definitive decisions and how that can affect the course of a game. I think that because we have umpires who make those definitive decisions, if it were to change to this new and quote unquote improved way of calling balls and strikes, I think a lot of fans, analysts, a lot of people would sort of question the technology, because if there was a borderline call and it rubbed certain people the wrong way, people assume this will be perfect. People assume that because we're bringing it into this storied game, that the change must be a positive change. And if that's the case, and it's not completely what people expected it to be, I feel like they'll question the whole system as a whole, or they'll question the system as a whole, excuse me. And I just think that truly, honestly, that automated strike zones have no place in baseball.
So I know you say that people would question the strike zone, but if they did have an automatic strike zone, they would keep it consistent. Like you keep saying that whether a ball would be called high or low, that wouldn't happen. They'd have a rule like whether half the ball is over the strike line or a fourth, whatever it is, players would be able to learn that rule. Something else that I want to bring up is that bad balls and strikes calls can impact a whole entire game and actually someone's season. Now, it kind of sounds crazy, but let me give you an example. In August of 2019, the Cubs were playing the Phillies. Tony Kemp was up. There was 1 ball, 2 strikes, no outs, 1 person on. A strike 3 call was called on him with a 0% strike rate on StatCast. Now you think, okay, well, the Cubs lose the game. They ended up gaining another run on. Maybe they won, maybe they would have lost. We don't know because there was a bad strike call. Now you think it's just one game, it's whatever. Well, in 2018, both the Cubs and Brewers and the Dodgers and Rockies had to go to tiebreaker games. So people think, oh, this really doesn't matter with one bad call, but really it can matter for a whole entire season.
Well, always interesting points here from Illini Sports Night. This has been Making a Point. I'm Joseph Fox.
And I'm Josh Peach.
Have a good evening.